One.
I'm sorry. I cleared the work session for House Bill 368 open at this time.
Thank you, Matt. Wonderful. Thank you. Mine's not even-
Now try.
I'll just stop. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, wrong one. Jeez. I've got two buttons instead of one to deal with here. So, so this bill was to allow families to come to this state for health care for their transgender child, and to allow them to get care here that they may not be able to get in their own state, and to allow the care provider to hold the information of what care that child receives, and not send that information across state lines. The challenge, I believe, is what is legally possible to help a family avoid prosecution in the state that they have come from. And I believe we have some information in front of us that would help us clarify what can't be done based on the U.S. Constitution. And if Representative Leon would like to make us aware of that information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the big things that we have within the U.S. Constitution is how the different states work together. In Article 4, Section 2, it states in the second clause, a person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime who shall flee from justice and be found in another state shall, on demand of the executive authority of the state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed to the state having jurisdiction of the crime. The most important part is looking to some of the case history around this, because in order for this to hold, the crime needs to have occurred in the state who is requesting the person. Having a crime exist when somebody leaves that state and then try to reach into that other state is one of those areas where those demands would not be valid in the first place. And we need to make sure that by saying that we are not going to comply with other states' laws, that also would impact if there was something of referral or care happening within another state. And that would only be subject to those who are actually in the property of that state. So this actually shows that the providers in New Hampshire would not be subject to those laws and would be something that should be vigorously defended by the Attorney General, because it would be improper for another state to charge somebody in New Hampshire for their actions in New Hampshire. That moves far beyond this relationship between the states. No, and I also want to say that I absolutely understand the intention behind this bill and the necessity to make sure that people know that they're welcome. I do have another question around this bill, because I'm not sure if transgender care is suffering the same shortages and backlogs that are being experienced in other parts of healthcare. Are our kids here in New Hampshire that have need for these services already able to get all the appointments that they need, or is there already more demand than they're able to accommodate? I'm not sure if you know that.
That's a good question. I know that at one time that was an issue. The biggest issue that I've seen so far is what therapists will accept payment from Medicaid. They may be willing to offer their services, but not for free. And they need to get paid for what they would typically be paid for taking care of any client. So that's an issue that's outside the scope of this, but there are therapists that can provide the services Right now, it's just making sure people can find them. So,
Thank you. If this area of medicine is actually fully staffed and fully meeting all of the demands, I hope that they can pass on how they're doing so well with the rest of the healthcare profession.
yeah.
My other one concern about this is I recognize that there's other states who have already had this sanctuary type policy for these procedures, but several of those are ones who have large centers of excellence for transgender care. And to me, if I were to go out of state to seek care for my child, I would most likely go to one of these areas with a center of excellence, regardless of what treatment it's for. So I'm concerned both about the impact on kids in New Hampshire who need access to this care, and also whether that would have a family come here to New Hampshire when they may be able to get their medical needs treated more comprehensively in another state, simply because they have a larger and more robust system. When you look to some of the websites that talk about the provision of care in New Hampshire, there's a lot of referrals we already do out of state to Massachusetts because they do so much.
Understood. There are a few that offer a similar thing. This bill is brought forward as to give another option for people to come to our state and maybe encourage them, if they would like, to stay in this state. That's another member of the community, and that was part of the impetus for introducing this bill, is not to have them question whether they would be welcomed or not, but to be able to provide service, especially that we do have the facility at Dartmouth Hitchcock that can provide services, which it's not just in Lebanon. They also offer some of their services in Manchester. There.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Missouri.
Yeah, so we requested information and we haven't received what we requested yet from Dartmouth Hitchcock in regards to that. So that's of a little bit of concern to me too, is that they're not getting us information that I believe is needed for us to proceed.
Did they? I don't know that we asked for that information for this bill. We did ask it for 619.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's kind of some overlap
Yeah.
in some of the information. So I think what's helpful information that we would receive about that would also pertain to some pieces of this, my opinion.
Yes.
Thank you. And
Representative
if I can add to that, so what Dartmouth Hitchcock is supposed to be, the best, and they do the most complex procedures that's offered for this kind of care. Talking about surgery, and they also, will prescribe puberty blockers and hormones, and they also have therapists who are specially trained in this area. They're supposed to be in the state one of the best, but so far all we've received from them is a cross-sectional survey on, suicidality after puberty blockers are initiated, and a study that has an N of 104, and very disjointed and not specific. They didn't send us anything robust. And if this is what the best care is basing their procedures and their policies on, I'm a little concerned. And I don't think that it's appropriate to entice people to come here to get that service provided. If this is the evidence that they're providing legislators for what they're doing.
Well, I'd have to agree. I can't deny that. On the other hand, they do exist, and they do offer high quality care to their patients. Whether they're providing us the information we need, it's a whole nother story. So, this legislation was to at least remove a barrier that I was made aware of by physicians in this state, because they were challenged by the question of should they release information outside the state that might cause a problem or a problem for the family as far as the information that's shared, and would that be a legal problem that would cause someone to be prosecuted? So they are concerned about releasing that form of information essentially without the approval of the family, because it's going to a legal entity. Did a quick look at the information you provided here, and it talks about the physical individual, but it doesn't talk about what information can be shared across state lines. And that's part of what this bill is all about, is the information that could be shared if a family and a child comes to New Hampshire. So it comes down, if they're considering getting care in another state, is to have New Hampshire be one of those options, and to make our medical people aware that they don't necessarily have to share information to another state that could be used to prosecute a family. And that might be an issue that a family is concerned about. But it also would allow that if a family wants that information to be shared, they would have that option.
I have a question. I wrote this question down when we had our very first hearing about this. That what if one parent wants surgery for their child and the other doesn't? How does that work?
And that would be beyond the scope of this bill. That's something that they would
From
have
out
to
of
work that out
state.
in court, as far as is the parent, does one parent have control over the health care of
Or
that
if they're
child or not?
split up,
Right.
and
Yes.
then maybe one lives in a different state and things
Right.
like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
So
nuances to.
that's
Yeah.
an issue associated with the divorce of that family.
Yeah. Go ahead, Leah, and then I have a follow up.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have so to jump off what you were saying about the information gathering, I only see that, it basically says that we can't, our state will not honor foreign subpoenas for information, from other states, right?
That's correct.
So I think that's where it drifts into the territory of this Article 4, of the US Constitution, that, we're not to interfere with that kind of extradition, whether it's a person or information. I think that it may kind of enter the area of interfering with due process of people who are being prosecuted in those states, because now they're not going to be able, our state is actively restricting their ability to extract evidence. And I understand that there's an ideological opposition to another state's laws, perhaps, but that's why the different states have the ability to make their own laws that govern their own states. And it just doesn't seem like this is within our authority to do.
Yeah, that was a question of mine. Has Representative Cannon, has any conversations been had with the Attorney General about this, especially constitutionally? From what Representative Leon read, it seems clear to me about the constitutionality of this, but I don't know if a conversation has been had with any higher ups in the AG's office.
We haven't contacted the Attorney General specifically. I'm looking at,
Yeah, I guess for me, it's the whole thing is the overreach and, across states. We can't override another state's
I'm
law.
looking at the methodology notes from the court. The Attorney General was not specifically contacted by us I know that OLS had this and believed that it could be enacted here, that all points were valid. So so I think, and I was reading through this piece that Representative Leon provided, and I'm looking at a bolded area. It says an accused will, however, be discharged on habeas corpus if he shows by clear and satisfactory evidence that he was outside the demanding state when the crime occurred. The following sentence, if, however, evidence is conflicting, habeas corpus is not the proper proceeding to try the question of an alibi. So I think where similar bills have passed other legislative bodies in other states, they would have the same issue. And currently, I don't know of any court case against this implementation in other states. I would like to proceed to offer this as an option, as something that's there for our medical personnel, as far as the question goes of should I release this information, knowing that by releasing it, I'm putting a family and a child at risk in the state that they live in. It's not necessarily requiring that the state is asking, I need this family to come back to Texas, for instance, to be processed. It's the family went to New Hampshire, got some services, medical services, went back to Texas. The question is then, can Texas prosecute that family for getting care in another state? And do we alleviate the question in the minds of the medical people providing that care? Because sometimes it may be, should I even provide this care? Because there is the potential that the family could be end up in a legal situation with the state that they came from. So part of this is to put it in our own statute that says, no, they can't be processed. They can't be prosecuted in another state for just providing information, or the family can't be prosecuted if they've gotten medical service here, and the information is provided by should not be provided by a medical professional here. It's in some ways it goes beyond the scope of HIPAA. It says that if they come to this state, the medical professional can keep that information here, even if requested by a court. Yes,
Just
Representative.
clarification on, receiving gender affirming health care, or mental health care. So gender affirming health care, is that inclusive then of transition surgeries on minors?
That would be as a part of the standards of care that a child, anyone is supposed to have be involved working with a therapist as well as with a psychologist.
Right, but so, and what if though the decision was made from a family out of state, they wanted their child to undergo, or the child wanted to go gender reassignment surgery? Is that this bill would that would make that?
That would be a
Allowable
possibility.
here.
It comes down to whatever services we offer here in New Hampshire
Yeah.
that are legal in New Hampshire. It does not say that
Yeah.
we could offer anything more.
Yeah, and I guess that's my struggle because I haven't heard a definite answer from Dartmouth Hitchcock as to what exactly they are providing right now.
Actually, on their website, they state they do not provide gender surgery to those under the age of 18.
They said that on their website, but when they were here, they weren't able to, she still was not able to provide that clarity. And even in the emails that we've sent, we've still not gotten that definite answer. So I'm just, that's the part I struggle with.
This bill, essentially, if a family comes here for transgender care. It's whatever the legal definition is here. It does not change our statutes as far as the services that can be offered. It does not give them any additional benefit. It would be the same medical services that we provide to transgender children here in New Hampshire.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My question would be about how frequently these children are meeting with the different providers, how often they're having these therapy sessions and psychotherapy sessions, and how often they're doing this in order to have that more rigorous support that is provided for in the guidelines so that they are getting that ongoing support through this whole transition process. Do you know how frequently they would be meeting with providers?
In some cases, it's every month. So then it would be up to the family. If they want to come here to New Hampshire and make sure that they're here every month, and that would be their decision.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty helpful. It seems that it would be a really big challenge for a family to maintain their residency in another state when they're coming monthly for care. And to me, it almost seems like a family in that situation. I've seen plenty of families move for a parent's job or for another need, moving to another state for other types of medical care, and actually making a move, even if they do maintain their home and rent it to somebody in the interim. If somebody were to move from Texas to New Hampshire in order to get this care, that would be a matter of a state then interfering with somebody who is a former resident of that state. I know that there's already been pushback against California trying to tax former residents of New Hampshire, former residents of California after leaving the state, and there's a large pushback on that idea of a state laying claim to somebody who once lived in that state. And so I guess I appreciate the goal of trying to make sure that this is more welcoming for these kids and their families, but I'm wondering if, flying back and forth monthly is even the best provision of care, especially because very few of these states with these rules even have direct flights to New Hampshire. And I appreciate being welcoming, but I'm also looking at the actual tactical efforts of it.
I understand the concern, but does that go beyond the scope of our bill? This bill is just to put it in statute that it's here, especially to protect our medical professionals. If a family decides that they want to live here temporarily and can afford their own situation to come up here and rent a piece of property, and then it's their decision to do that, and their decision is as to what charges they might be facing in their own state. So that's a family decision, to provide, essentially provide, especially for our own medical professionals, that they don't have to worry about the legal issues about providing care. Then it comes down to, does a family want to factor in that they would have to be here on a regular basis to provide that care? That's a family decision, not the state decision. The state here should be focused on, and the issue here is, can we protect our medical professionals? Can they hold on to the information if that information is requested from out of state? If a family decides that to get the care that they need to work out the arrangements for how they will do that. That's their responsibility. It's not the responsibility in this bill. That's beyond the scope.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My concern is just over how practical of an option this may be compared to the cost to the state to potentially defend a lawsuit against this if it is found to be unconstitutional. I recognize that there may not be any challenges to California's statute on this, but just because a suit hasn't been brought about the constitutionality in another state doesn't mean that it won't be coming in the future, and that could have a really, really large fiscal impact when this is perhaps something that would be better as a fine-tuned approach to the ultimate privacy of people's medical records and to better protect the privacy, the sharing of anybody's medical records, and to just better enforce New Hampshire privacy laws around medical privacy that are in excess of that of HIPAA, which is allowed. And I think that that might be a more elegant solution that addresses both the needs of this community and more broadly addresses the needs of Granite Staters. And while I appreciate everything behind this bill, it just doesn't seem to be the most effective use of resources in order to put out that welcome mat. That's my largest concern is that there's so many challenges to it. And I'm not sure how effective it would be, even if we did go through all of those steps, put the state at risk in order to offer this when we may not be the destination of choice anyways.
Representative Cannon, is there any openness to possibly creating an interim study surrounding this so we can get more information from Dartmouth Hitchcock and because that's for me that's just this big question mark that with all the hearings we've had still has not made me feel comfortable with what I've heard.
Would you like to move that motion?
I would.
I'd second that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then, because a motion's been made, there is a second. We have to act on this motion. So I would like to know how many are in favor and how many are not. We move forward. So we have 3 in favor and 1 no. So, I believe that that's going to be what we will recommend to the full committee when we meet.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. I think just we did have tried to have a hearing on this previously.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've had, we've presented our questions and everything about it. And with what's still, I would actually love to hear from the AG too. I'd want to make sure we're not crossing any constitutional boundaries because I'm a big fan of that
I can see
Constitution.
if
So,
I will see what I can get for an answer.
okay. Yeah. No, I'd like to dig into it more personally. So.
Okay, yeah. So,
There could be overreach on this today, and there could be overreach on a different issue in the future. I think that it's important to make sure we protect all of our citizens and people who visit the state. I just want to make sure we do it in the right way. So thank you for bringing the bill.
it sounds good. Okay. Thank you all. So I'll declare this work session over.
So then what happens after?
Yes, so this will be the subcommittee recommendation that then gets voted on the 13th. Thank you, Jerry. Sorry you had to be by yourself. We're back together again, and it's good to see a few more faces around this than we had this morning. So that's very, very good to see. I'd like to start discussing some of the issues around the conversion therapy and the discussions and some of the testimony that we heard last we met for the public hearing. There was testimony from Mr. Urchel from GLAD where he stated that gender identity was fixed, but unfortunately that is not consistent with the guidelines and information in the World Professional Association of Transgender Health Standard of Care 8 guidelines. I have provided a copy of 7 pages from those guidelines. It's what begins with the titling of Chapter 6, Adolescence. So I will read you just a couple little dots from here. First off, on this adolescence, this chapter applies to adolescents from the start of puberty until the age of legal majority. In most places, that's 18. Some countries, it's 15. In some places, it's as high as 21 years of age. All of the WPATH guidelines are all sensitive to whatever the legal realities are in the area of treatment, and they provide great accommodation for that. So speaking to the issue around gender identity and whether it is fixed from the start. Initially, when care was provided to adolescents, they were those adolescents who had been clear and persistent from the time that they were first born or close to when they were first born. And it was a very highly screened group that did not include as many people as there are today. So if we look on the second page, so it's S44 down to near the bottom of the second to last paragraph, it states that for some youth, gender identity development appears fixed and is often expressed from a young age, while for others, there may be a developmental process that contributes to gender identity over time. It speaks to some studies, and then flipping to the next page, starting halfway through the 4th line, it states, it is important to note it is not possible to distinguish between those for whom gender identity may seem fixed from birth and those for whom gender identity development appears to be a developmental process. Since it is impossible to definitively delineate the contributions of various factors contributing to the gender identity development for any given young person, a comprehensive clinical approach is important and necessary. And then continues, conceptualization of gender identity by shifting from dichotomous, for example, binary, categorization of male and female, to a dimensional gender spectrum along a continuum would also be necessary to better understand this. Later on the page, it notes that one trend identified is that more young people are presenting to gender clinics with non-binary identities. On the very last page has the summary of the statement of recommendations for adolescents. And if you look at 6.2, it states, we recommend healthcare professionals working with gender diverse adolescents facilitate the exploration and expression of gender openly and respectfully so that no one particular identity is favored. That is, in essence, what we tried to do when we were looking to amend the statute on conversion therapy. Nobody wants to force a child to be somebody that they aren't, but the current language is not accommodating to the current state of knowledge around the around how gender identity is formed, and it's also not consistent with the WPATH guidelines. We can figure out if we do want to pursue making any of these changes to conversion therapy, or if we would save that for some other time when we can bring in some experts. I think that might be better because there's so many people just seeing these headlines and not understanding the real true work we're trying to do here to make sure that non-binary individuals are respected as well. I don't know if there's any thoughts about whether we should proceed looking at this, or if that's something that we should not do at this point.
I think we should not do
At all, or right now?
at all. The people who testified the other week and then in the spring were happy with how the conversion therapy ban was worded, and I'm going to trust them on that.
Representative Cannon?
I agree. I don't.
Microphone, there we go.
I agree with Representative Nutter-Upton that we shouldn't address it here. Part of the reason is because we're having a dialogue about transgender individuals. We're not having a discussion about LGBTQ people in total. And that's the problem here, is that what we're talking about is transgender people, and we haven't had in the group of people that we're speaking of, we didn't have the entire LGBTQ population sharing. And that's why in the past, when conversion therapy has come up as a separate bill, that we had an entire community of people addressing all areas of that could be affected by it. And conversion therapy would impact gay and lesbian people as well as transgender people. And as such, I don't believe that we can do it justice in this bill.
Thank you for that. I think that we had that one clarification on the wording, but the larger point is that I frankly don't believe that non-binary people are appropriately protected within that conversion therapy statute. But I think we can leave that to another time and focus on purely the genital gender reassignment surgeries for minors. So there's a whole paradigm of care that is outlined quite well in the WPATH Standard of Care 8. Going back to this first page, it speaks about the eligibility criteria being a persistent, long history of gender nonconformity or dysphoria, emerging or intensifying at the onset of puberty. In particular, it also speaks to the absence or management of psychological, medical, or social problems that interfere with treatment. I'm very concerned with the idea that that there's so much of a focus on any one treatment that dealing with the larger scope and reasons around suicidal ideology is being pushed away with the idea that the surgery will fix everything. And I'm afraid that that's a very dangerous thought. It also speaks about needing the support of people around, and most importantly, the provision of informed consent. I did want to make note that I had made the point about the fact that when you're a teenager, it feels like everything needs to happen right away or else it'll never happen. And that was put a lot more elegantly in the standard of care here, saying that adolescents often experience a sense of urgency that stems from hypersensitivity to reward. And their sense of timing has been shown to be different from that of older individuals. That cites a study of the Van Leeuwenhorst et al. From 2010. That's on the second page. And I think that it's quite important to make sure that as we look at this, we try and understand and balance their needs now and their lifelong needs as well. So given the lifelong implications of medical treatment and the young age at which treatments may be started, adolescents, their parents, and care providers should be informed about the nature of the evidence base. It seems that reasonable that decisions to move forward with surgical treatment should be made carefully. And despite the slowly growing body of evidence supporting the effectiveness of early medical intervention, the number of studies is still low, and there are few outcome studies that follow youth into adulthood. And so the standard of care says that a systematic review regarding outcomes of treatment in adolescence is not possible. That's both medical and surgical. That's on the fourth page of this, S46. The psychological function, body image, and treatment satisfaction, when you look at a meta-analysis of the data in here, only followed up from 3 months to 2 years after the initiation of treatment. When we're talking about surgical procedures, we need to make sure that the safety and efficacy last longer than that. You know, I spoke before about comparing this to knee replacement surgery. In knee replacements, when you have your first one, you have a pretty good shot at it. It's usually going to work pretty well. But if it fails, you need to remove more bone, and then you have the revision one. And that one might last 10 years, might last 15. Hopefully orthopedics has improved since I stopped paying as much attention to it. But after that, you're in a wheelchair. And that's just your knee. If you're talking about these surgeries, we don't know what the durability is. We know that the gold standard is a pretty good durability, but the newer procedures, either with the peritoneal lining or the colonic lining, do not have any sort of idea as to how long they'll last. And I know that I'm personally quite concerned that by rushing into a procedure, you may end up unable to have that body part that has been so crucial to you through a large amount of your lifetime. Therefore, I think we need to proceed with caution. Let's see. And then that gets to the quality of evidence. Dartmouth presented us with a letter stating that this is well researched. We asked them for that research, and we were provided with 3 points of information. All of them were on puberty blockers or hormones. None were on surgery. If there is no data that can be provided showing that this is in fact well researched and safe and efficacious, I'm very, very, very concerned about the provision of this care in this state. I've reached out again to Dartmouth to ask them for that information, but nothing else has been forthcoming. We have worked together to further narrow the amendment. The one that we brought as the non-germane amendment had simply taken the previous sections of the bill to not make too many changes, to simply reduce that down to the genital gender reassignment surgeries. This one has not been drafted with OLS because they're under incredible pressure between both retained bills and our new bills coming through. So they've confirmed that this is in the right format and this is otherwise correct, but they asked that I present it non-formally today. So
that means we can't vote on it today?
We can vote to have this language. In a work group, we don't have to have the actual amendment in order to vote on it, but in executive session, we need to have the actual amendment number.
I see.
Because we're just a casual group at this point. We've been named, we've been noticed, we're having these meetings, but because we're not a quorum of the meeting, this is a directional indication to the full committee and not a binding decision. So in narrowing it down, it brings it to a purpose, stating that the legislature finds that the following facts and circumstances exist, which make the enactment of the statute necessary for protection of minors and for furtherance of the public interest. Physicians have an ethical and legal duty to obtain patients' informed consent before ordering testing and treatment. Older children and adolescents should be asked to provide their assent for treatment in addition to their parents' permission. A patient's informed consent requires adequate information, capacity to decide, and the absence of coercion. Best practices urge shared decision-making between parent or parents and child, and in general preferring alternatives that will not foreclose important future choices by the adolescent and the adult the patient will become. Multivariate analyses of published studies between 2015 and 2022 showed no decrease in suicidality after gender-affirming surgery, with some studies showing a significant increase in psychiatric hospitalizations and suicide after surgical transition. And there's a lack of high-quality clinical trials which provide data on outcomes for adolescent and genital gender reassignment surgeries or young adult genital gender reassignment surgeries, particularly after pubertal suppression and cross-sex hormones. Finding that adolescent genital gender reassignment surgery generally lacks both adequate information for informed consent and involves a high risk of coercion for parental consent when parents believe that they are faced with a choice between their child committing suicide or consenting to their child's genital gender reassignment surgeries. And in the absence of high-quality data to prove the safety and efficacy, including long-term outcomes, only people over the age of majority should receive genital gender reassignment surgery in the state of New Hampshire. It goes on to provide definitions to really make sure that we nail this down into specifically to exclude anything around a disorder of sex development, which would be malformations, other ones, and just to make sure that it's very clear what is included. And then it prohibits a physician from performing genital gender reassignment surgery on minors in the state of New Hampshire, and that's defined as surgical procedures in people born without disorders of sex development, including but not limited to mediaplasty, phalloplasty, or vaginoplasty, which seek to change genitalia from male genitalia to female genitalia, from female genitalia to male genitalia, to form a combination of male and female genitalia or an absence of genitalia in those born with exclusively male or exclusively female genitalia, or by removing non-malignant genitalia. So It does not prohibit physicians from performing reconstructive surgeries on the genitalia of minors to correct malformation, malignancy, injury, or physical disease, removal of malignant, malformed, or otherwise damaged genitalia, genital surgeries on minors with disorders of sex development, or male circumcision. And then the enforcement is around it, referral or provision being unprofessional conduct, and to allow action if it's found that somebody's rights have been violated. So this is definitely whittling down this bill to just the idea of the genital gender reassignment surgeries on minors. Any thoughts? Representative Cannon?
Um, I'm concerned that we're putting a lot more into legislative effort that probably should be left to the medical community. It's like we are not medical experts. We can read this, which is good stuff, but if it changes over time and we put it in the statute, how quickly can we change it in the statute to reflect what's been changed by the medical community? If we leave this in the hands of the medical community and let them know they need to do their job, that's a different story. The people who put together the World Professional Association of Transgender Health has been around for a couple of decades, and before that it was the Harry Benjamin Standards of Care. So the people that have been working on this, and I know for a fact they did not all agree with what was being produced over time. They had to work together to make these things happen. That is an organization that is focused on our transgender health. New Hampshire legislature is focused on doing everything for the community in New Hampshire, not just the transgender. This is a lot of text to put into statute that could change over time. And if we have to change it, it will take a couple of years to change it. In the meantime, there are going to be kids and families that are dependent on the medical community that they're working with to be able to make changes and to do things to help them. And so to put all this stuff into statute is crazy.
Representative Cushman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I respectfully disagree with the previous comments. I think that when the interest of children is on the table, if the research changes, there's a reason that our process takes so long, that everything goes through a lot of scrutiny, multiple hearings in both bodies, and we do the amendment process, we hear from the public, and what has been failed to be demonstrated here is that these are efficacious and have long-term benefit. That has not been demonstrated, and I think that in order to protect, this is a very small subset of people who goes for this kind of treatment, but there is a history, a disturbing history, an unfortunate one in medicine where minorities have been exploited, through the practices that have been employed. And I think here is an appropriate place for the legislature to step in and say, put a pause on it in the state of New Hampshire. If Massachusetts wants to continue to allow these surgeries, it's not very far to go there and seek this care. If it's for that very small number, Dartmouth said it's very rare that it occurs in children, but they could not tell us that it doesn't happen here in children, and they didn't give us a number. They also didn't provide their policies and procedures for deciding how it's decided if a minor is going to receive that care, nor a body of evidence demonstrating that this is okay. So the way I see it is if the literature changes, and that takes years in itself, then the legislature can then meet again and do its job and determine if the evidence is sufficient enough to representatives of the people to allow these surgeries in New Hampshire. But right now, I don't see that.
Representative Missouri?
Yeah, thank you. I mentioned in the last hearing, I brought up the billing codes and how it was very clear to me in research and asking people that there were billing codes in place in another state for transition surgery, but there was no billing codes for backtracking out of that. And that became a serious issue. So, you know, I would like to see things like that in place so that that doesn't happen here. So a child gets through a certain part of a process and then has no way back, and then has no way to pay for it or anything like that. Like there really is no turning back at and when we're talking minors, like these could be small children that we've heard developmentally, it's like the age of 26 that things keep changing. You know, we hear about tattoos and tanning that's not that is not allowed for minors. There are reasons behind that. So I hear you when you say putting statutes in place, but we have statutes in place for other things that you can't turn back on this. So this seems like a way more serious thing that, you know, and I heard last time too, that someone mentioned that this is an attack on a certain community. And that's not what this is at all, because many of us have friends in this community. This is, if you're an adult and this is, you go do your thing, you know, as adults, do our thing. We are talking specifically about minors and children that have a huge future ahead of them. And so why not, you know, go through therapy and the processes that we do have in place. And then, you know, at a certain age, if that's still the direction they want to go, then that's their decision. But, you know, we are here as a legislature to stand for our children. And for many of us, that's what this is. So to be told that this is an attack on that is personally highly offensive, because that's not what this is. A lot, I think, of people just see this as a protection for kids, that they're not quite there, you know, with making that decision. And so that's my take on it.
Representative Cannon?
Here's my concern. It's for the families with children that are faced with gender dysphoria, is that we might be limiting the options they have to save their child. And so that's one of the concerns that I have with this bill, even if it's just being presented, because I know that there's a lot of children out there that are challenged, that are looking to where are they going, and that they're not accepted. And if we as a legislature are putting new things in place, they may not understand why we're doing that. It just looks like someone just put a wall up and I'm not going to get past it. And maybe I need to do something else about it. And that's scary.
There are therapy procedures, though, in place right now. Like, so that is providing assistance to them. It's not like there's nothing available, right?
Tell that to the child and the parent that's already bringing their child to therapy who's struggling. I've seen it with adults even that are struggling. They're going to therapy for things, and then eventually they take their life because they don't see a future for themselves. So I'm just putting it out there. As we move forward, I recognize that we're protecting children. We have to, and there are lots of things that the medical community is put in place and needs to work. But if we as a legislature said no, because we put it in statute, this is all you can get, and this we're doing something that limits things, And as I'm saying, if it changes in the medical community, they can change it in the medical community. If it changes there and we need to change it as a statute, it could take 2 years to get it changed. So in the meantime, we have a family with kids that needs some assistance, and we have a statute that says, no, you can't do that.
Representative Nadarapam and then
It's my
Kushner.
understanding that the main gist of this bill is to make sure that gender reassignment surgeries do not happen under the age of 18.
Right.
And I agree with that. And as far as I heard from everything I heard from Dartmouth, they don't do it. Someone else on our committee said it's on their website. You don't get gender reassignment surgery under 18. So I think we're going kind of far afield. I think we can agree, we don't like to dictate too prescriptively to what doctors can do, what insurance companies can pay for or not. But I think we can agree on those kinds of surgeries don't need to happen in New Hampshire under 18. So I'm not sure we even need this bill if those surgeries are not happening under 18. I believe they're not. I believe others perhaps are more skeptical. So we don't need to be emotional about this. It's always very important to protect children. Those of us who have raised teenagers, understand changing of minds and growing into new thoughts and all the changes that happen. But the bare bones of this is no surgeries under 18, and I think we can agree on that. So we can't discuss all developmental teenager stuff. We would be here for years. So anyway.
I'd have teens by then. Representative Cushman?
Thank you. So on the other side of Representative Cannon's point, at the same time, if it takes 2 years to change the law the other way, if the research catches up to it, that was your argument. In the meantime, those kids would be maybe not have access to this certain care, which I don't see a good evidence base for in the one hospital that says that they do it, but rarely in minors. On the other side of that, if we don't pass this bill, they acknowledge that it's rare. They did not outright say that they don't do it and have not done it. I have personally heard of children in New Hampshire who have received surgeries, and meanwhile, that can all take place without clinical trial data showing the efficacy of these surgeries on minors for the long term. And I mean like surgical clinical trials where they compare the surgery to other treatments and therapies and have a control group also. And there's no systemic reviews on this. There's no meta-analyses. All I've received so far are small studies that look at either surveys telling about suicidal ideation with puberty blockers or with hormones. And they don't go long term. So in the meantime, without evidence to show that this is clinically safe, and I'm not just talking about suicide ideation wise, there are kids who are going to be harmed by this irreversibly if we don't pass this bill.
Representative Cannon?
I think if we're looking for that kind of information, we should be working with the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, because those folks are doing this to try and are tracking this, the same type of information you're asking for. It's not being done state by state. It's not being done outside of the medical community. So we're talking about things that are already being done at a medical level. And not here. We are not medical experts. We're totally dependent on the medical community to get this information, just like just like introducing a new drug and all this, it needs that testing and stuff. It doesn't happen by the state agency. It's totally dependent on the industry that's doing it. Now, having said that, I really appreciate what you've been doing here. It's trying to narrow the focus and make sure that we're not hurting kids. That is what ultimately we need to do. What I'm trying to say is, here in the legislature, is it our job to do all of the medical review, all that analysis? Is it and to have that and make our decisions based, or should we go back to the medical community? Is that you have a duty to the public to do your job? Their job is not to hurt someone. It's physician heal people. And if they're not doing that, they're not doing their job. But should we put that into statute as far as all this detail goes? And if we do this, and we're focused on the transgender community, are we not discriminating against all those other groups? I mean, this group can compare to other groups. We don't have things in for the MS community. We don't have things for kids with autism. There's a whole spectrum of childcare things that need to be addressed. This is just one community of people. And right now, this is, from my perspective, this is discrimination. We've zeroed in on one, and we're taking it out of the medical community's hands, who are involved with all these different things. And now we're going to put it in the legislature, and it says discrimination all over it, because it's just a very small community of kids and people. And as far as I'm concerned, and the community is concerned, it's really focused. And I understand your focus in this particular community, but there's also other communities that have surgical needs and medical needs and therapy needs, and we're not addressing any of that. And maybe in doing this, we ought to be addressing all those too. So that's what bothers me. We just zeroed in on one community of kids, and if we do that for one part of the community, shouldn't we be doing it for all of this? As far as I'm concerned, and as far as many people are concerned, this is discrimination. And we have laws against that. And the transgender community, including kids, are called out in there that we should not be discriminating against kids. And as far as I'm concerned, this stuff, although it's good information, is discrimination. This ought to be in the working between families, the kids, and their medical care providers, because it's not a simple thing. I know this because I went through this whole process myself and working with the medical community to get my care. And it was not a simple thing. It's not, I'm gonna go get surgery. No, it's not. It's many years of therapy. It's many years of assistance. It's even when I decided to get my thing, it took a full year. And I ended up talking with a lot of people. I had to provide statements from my therapist, my psychologist, my PCP, my endocrinologist, and a couple others to even get in the door. And then I had to speak with 3 different surgeons who were going to be part of the surgical procedures. It took a year. And even then, when I went in for my surgeries, I got asked about 6 times, do you know what you're doing? They are experts at what they do, but they also are people. They really care about their patients. And that's, this, putting it into legislation is taking some of that away from those people that care for kids. We put it down as, not only do they have to figure out, what does the medical community tell me? What's the best thing to do to help this child with current knowledge and current tools? And then they have to go back and say to the state, what can I do based on what you put in statute? And are we limiting the care that someone can get by doing this?
My question my question regarding the discriminatory law would be questioning if in 1970 we had put in a prohibition to prohibit doctors from failing to provide antibiotics to Black men with syphilis. If protecting that minority community by preventing a medical practice that was happening would have been discriminatory, or if it would have been protective.
I think that's a little far afield.
And we're talking about whether medical guidelines are the end all be all, or if occasionally there's time for the legislation. Representative Nutter, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, Representative Cannon, this bill is focused on children, and we've heard your story, and we care for you, and all those things. But I want to focus back on. I think we're at a point. Are we not able to vote whether this subcommittee recommends or not? And then we take it to our executive meeting on Monday, and then it goes, as I say, to the 400, to the full house. So we can do a lot of sidebars here, but it could be a long day, and we are in agreement on some minor issues. I will leave it to OLS to decide if this language is something that one puts in a bill. It seems more of a summary of facts. It seems a little out of form to me, but I'm not an expert in that. So I'm going to leave it to them and leave it to the judgment of our fellow legislators about how we proceed from here.
Representative Mazur?
I just have respectfully, I hear your story, and correct me if I'm wrong, you went through, as an adult, those procedures as an adult. Whereas, I just heard she stood up in front of a group of people last week, and yes, this is in Massachusetts, but that's the thing, is like, knowing that could happen here is really, disturbing to me, that in Massachusetts, she walked in, as a minor, and within 45 minutes, this is a doctor. She didn't go to a therapist or anything. Within 45 minutes was put on testosterone, and then soon after walked in, and then was able to have a double mastectomy. No therapy at all. She'll tell you this. She was here at our hearing when we first did this, and since then she's in her 20s, and all of her reproductive organs have been removed, and so when we hear that your story, we hear that story, but it's finding the balance of, and as Representative Nutter Upham said, we're talking about children, and that's our focus.
And we're talking about genital reassignment
Right.
surgery only on children.
That you can't
that's-
go back on.
That's the thing we're talking about.
Exactly.
We're not trying to outlaw therapy
Right.
and hormone blockers, which, as children are going through puberty earlier and earlier for we're not sure what
Yep.
reasons. And so there's a lot of other reasons besides wanting
Yeah.
to change their gender or sex, that whatever. So many
Yeah.
of the stories that people have told are a little terrifying and frightening, but I'd like to pull us back to with what we agree on is the
Yeah. And I think
Okay.
this bill now is a testament to this subcommittee and the work that we've done in getting it to the root. Look at the things that have been removed from it. That's a testament that we've been listening to people, and we've been making the changes. And so there's a lot of stuff that's been removed from this because we are listening to all communities, and parents and people in the different communities. So I think the work that we've done in getting this bill to where it's at now is something.
And I do have one other part about the fact that the doctors aren't always following all of the clinical guidelines. In the WPATH Standard of Care 8, it says that providers should be prepared to support adolescents who detransition. And it states, it cites a study, the Vanderbush 2021 study, saying that many of them expressed difficulties finding help during their detransition process. And it was they reported their detransition was an isolating experience during which they did not receive either sufficient or appropriate support. Despite best practices and despite the fact that people are working and trying to do their absolute best, some doctors are humans too. those who set the policies for hospitals are humans too. And that's why I believe that taking these findings from the WPATH, which state that there are not those data on, there is not sufficient data yet, and they see that they need to give to a narrative review as opposed to a meta-analysis, because there are not sufficient data to even provide a meta-analysis within the standard of care. I think that's why it's appropriate to act here. And quite frankly, the reason why there is this information regarding sort of the state of where medicine is now is so that if the standard of care 9 comes out and there's a bunch of clinical evidence that shows that what was in place when we put this into law is no longer fact, that will be a great reason for a future legislature to reverse course and say, actually, no, now there is high quality data that proves the safety and efficacy of gender genital reassignment surgeries with the procedures that are offered to minors. When that data is there goes that argument. But the data are not there, and I believe that that this is the way to protect. I think we may have reached the conclusion. I don't want to stop anybody from speaking. I'd recognize a motion. Or you probably, yeah. Do you want to, Representative Cushman?
I move that we recommend to the full committee that we adopt this amendment language when it comes to the full committee.
Okay, and seconded by Representative Mazur. I think we've had enough discussion, so I can call the roll. Would that be correct? Yep. Okay, Representative Nataratham?
No.
Representative Cannon?
No.
Representative Mazur?
Yes.
Representative Cushman?
Yes.
Representative Shapiro is not here, and Representative Leon is yes. So that would be 2-1 with 1 absence to recommend that this language be drafted into an official amendment for the committee to adopt. So if there's not any further discussion.
2-1.
Oh, yes, Representative Mazur.
So Representative Natarajan, can you clarify to me then? So I heard you say,
I think it was
can I
just to move it along. She wasn't ready to make the motion, but she wanted somebody to make the motion just because she didn't think we were going to come to a
Okay.
full agreement.
Okay.
Was that the question?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I understand
Okay.
trying to ask.
Okay.
I think maybe that's not
Okay.
something we do in the legislature.
Okay.
I have my reasons.
Okay.
And I hope that-
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Cushman?
Just a point of order. You said it was 2-1?
It was
3-2.
Sorry, 3-2.
Okay.
I apologize. The migraine
And
has
one
crept in.
absence. Okay.
And 1 absence.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I will close this work session on House Bill 619. Thank you.